The letter that gave me strength, the steady beeping beside Eleanor Cole's hospital bed, had been fading for hours, softening into longer pauses until it finally flattened into one unbroken tone. The clock read 3:42 p.m. That was the official time St. Joseph Medical Center recorded her passing, but for Marion Cole, the moment had arrived long before that. Somewhere in the depths of the night, holding Eleanor's weakening hand, listening to her breaths grow shallower in the dim light of the room, Marion had already felt her go. She stood alone. Voices drifted in from the hallway, rolling carts, visiting families offering each other comfort, but none of that warmth belonged to her. Her husband, Alex, had never shown up. His sister, Stephanie, hadn't called. No one from the Cole family had bothered to check in, not even out of courtesy. The only other person in the room was a nurse whose face carried both exhaustion and a gentleness that couldn't be faked. The nurse stepped closer, adjusting the blanket around Eleanor one final time, then turned to Marion with quiet sympathy and pressed a small, slightly wrinkled envelope into her hand. "She asked us more than once to make sure this got to you," the nurse said softly. "Only now." For a moment Marion couldn't bring herself to open it. She stood in the hush of the room, the hum of fluorescent lights mixing with the lingering echo of the flatline. Eventually her fingers, trembling, tore the envelope open. Inside lay an old silver key, tarnished at the edges, and a slip of paper bearing an address deep in the Washington forest. Beneath it, in Eleanor's careful handwriting, a single sentence. Asterisk, "They never loved me. Let them learn what it means to be forgotten." Asterisk, the words chilled Marion more than the sterile air of the room ever could. She folded the envelope and slipped it into her coat pocket. When she stepped into the hallway, the hospital felt too loud, too bright, as though the world had already moved on from Eleanor's death. Marion walked slowly toward the exit, her steps heavy, her chest hollow. Something had shifted inside her, permanently, irrevocably, and she felt it settle into place as she pushed open the doors and stepped out into the gray Tacoma afternoon. Marion didn't start the car right away. She sat motionless in the driver's seat, hands resting on the wheel, watching the late afternoon light shift across the parking lot. She could feel the envelope in her coat pocket, heavy in a way that had nothing to do with its weight. For nearly half an hour she stayed there, silent, stunned, unbearably alone. Shock settled over her like a damp Pacific Northwest fog, thick and unmoving. By the time she reached her neighborhood, her phone was vibrating in the cup holder. Alex. She considered letting it ring out, but exhaustion won, and she answered. "Hey," Alex said, his voice casual, distracted, almost cheerful. "You still out? If you're stopping somewhere, can you grab milk and maybe some bread? Didn't get a chance earlier." Marion closed her eyes. "Alex," she said, her voice flat. "Your mother died today. At 3:42. There was a pause, a long one, but not the kind that carried grief. More like the sound of a man switching gears because the conversation had veered into something inconvenient. "Oh," he finally said. "Well, I had meetings. You know how it is. We'll figure out arrangements later. Just get home when you can." His dismissiveness slid into her chest like a blade she'd already felt too many times. It didn't surprise her. Somehow that made it hurt more. She ended the call without another word. When she walked through their front door that evening, the house felt colder than before. Unwelcoming, hollow, as if it were only pretending to be a home. Alex wasn't there. A game replay murmured from the living room TV, left running from the night before. Marion lay awake long after midnight, unable to rest. The silence pressing against the walls felt different now. Not peaceful. Just empty. She had crossed a threshold she couldn't step back over. Whatever her life had been before that day, it wasn't hers anymore. Dawn had barely touched the sky when Marion pulled out of the driveway, the forested highway stretching ahead like a summons she couldn't ignore. The address Eleanor had written didn't belong to any place Marion recognized. It led her away from Tacoma, past misty evergreens and winding back roads, deep into the secluded stretches of the Olympic Peninsula. The pavement narrowed until it gave way to a rough, overgrown path. Branches brushed the sides of her car, tapping softly against the windows as if the forest itself were testing her resolve. The trees thickened, draped in moss, their shadows weaving across the ground in shifting patterns. Marion kept driving, her pulse slow but steady, guided only by the coordinates Eleanor had insisted she receive. Eventually the path opened into a small clearing. There it was, a faded cabin tucked beneath towering firs and tangled wild roses. Time had worn the paint to muted streaks of gray and green, but the structure stood solid, almost stubbornly so, like it had been waiting for someone. Marian stepped out into cool, damp air carrying the familiar scent of cedar and rain. Her boots sank into soft earth as she approached the door. The old key felt strangely warm in her hand. The lock turned without resistance. Inside, the cabin breathed with the scent of lavender, dust, and old wood. Sunlight filtered through clouded windows, casting a soft haze across shelves lined with worn books. Nothing felt abandoned. The space seemed preserved, like a memory Eleanor had kept safe from the rest of the world. A blanket folded neatly on a chair. A ceramic mug beside a stack of paperbacks. Dried herbs hanging near the window. Every detail held a sense of deliberate care. On the kitchen table lay another envelope, crisp despite the dust around it. In Eleanor's unmistakable hand. Asterisk to be delivered to my attorney. Asterisk. Marian stared at it. Her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and understanding. This wasn't an accident. Eleanor hadn't left her random scraps of a life. She had entrusted her with something purposeful, something Marian was only just beginning to grasp. She didn't open the second envelope right away. Instead, she carried it out onto the small porch, needing air before she faced another of Eleanor's secrets. The forest around the cabin was silent except for the drip of overnight rain sliding from the branches. When she finally dialed the number written on the envelope, she expected no one to answer. But the line picked up almost immediately. Alice Vanderbilt speaking. The voice was composed, steady, the voice of someone used to handling complicated things. Marian introduced herself and explained that Eleanor Cole had passed the day before. There was a pause, short but meaningful. "I'm very sorry to hear that," Alice said gently. "And yes, I've been expecting your call." The phrasing sent a ripple down Marian's spine. It wasn't surprise in Alice's voice. It was readiness, as though Eleanor had planned this moment with careful precision. "There are instructions we have to follow," Alice continued. "The reading of the will can't proceed unless everyone Eleanor named is present. That includes your husband, Alex Cole Jr., and his sister Stephanie Cole. They need to attend." Marian agreed, though her mind tightened at the thought. That evening, when Alex came home and Stephanie arrived not long after, Marian tried to explain that Eleanor had left instructions, that the attorney needed all of them in one room. Alex chuckled under his breath. Stephanie rolled her eyes. "A will?" Stephanie scoffed. She had nothing. What's there to read? Old sweaters and mystery novels. Mom lived off Social Security and complaints, Alex added. "Don't build this up, Marian." They laughed together, dismissing Eleanor's life, her death, everything in between. Marian said nothing. She didn't mention the cabin hidden deep in the rainforest. She didn't mention the key that had turned so smoothly in the lock. She didn't reveal the second envelope sitting untouched on the kitchen table, addressed to attorney Alice Vanderbilt. She simply watched them, realizing quietly that neither of them had any idea what was coming. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of that. Alice Vanderbilt's office sat on the fourth floor of an old brick building in downtown Tacoma, overlooking the gray stretch of Pacific Avenue. The conference room felt too bright for the occasion that morning. Sunlight filtering through tall windows, reflecting off polished wood and neatly stacked files. Marian took a quiet seat near the end of the table, hands folded in her lap. Alex and Stephanie arrived together, bickering about parking, and dropped into their chairs with visible impatience. Two elderly women, Eleanor's longtime friends, sat nearby, clutching their purses with a kind of nervous reverence. Marian recognized their faces from the framed photos Eleanor had kept by her bedside. When Alice entered, the room fell into a respectful silence. She greeted everyone with a firm nod and placed a thick folder on the table. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "We're here to read the last will and testament of Eleanor Cole." She was very clear about how she wished this process to be handled. Stephanie leaned back, arms crossed. "Let's just get on with it." Alice opened the folder and began. Asterisk to my son, Alex Cole Jr. Asterisk. A slight smirk touched Alex's face. Asterisk I leave forgiveness and nothing else. Asterisk, the smirk collapsed. A stunned laugh escaped him. Half disbelief, half wounded pride. Alice continued without pausing. Asterisk, to my daughter Stephanie Cole. I leave the wedding ring she once admired and tried to take. May it remind her that promises still matter. Asterisk, Stephanie's jaw tightened, her face draining of color. Asterisk, to my dear friends Margaret Holt and Diane Weaver. I leave financial gifts in recognition of their years of loyalty and kindness. Asterisk, the two women exchanged tearful glances, whispering quiet thanks. Then Alice lifted her gaze to Marion. Asterisk, and to Marion Cole I leave everything else, the cabin property, all remaining savings, personal belongings and insurance benefits. Asterisk, the room seemed to inhale sharply. Alex shot to his feet. This is a joke, he snapped. She was confused. Someone manipulated her. Stephanie joined in, her voice sharp and trembling. We'll take this to court. She must have been coerced. Alice remained composed. She reached into the folder for another document. Eleanor anticipated your reaction. She underwent a full psychiatric evaluation 1 week before signing this will. She slid the certified report across the table. It confirmed she was fully competent. Alex's anger flickered, but he held on to it. Alice produced a small flash drive. She also recorded a video explaining her decisions. If necessary, it will be presented to the court. Silence fell thick, heavy, undeniable. Alex sat back down slowly. Stephanie looked away, blinking hard, her bravado evaporating. In that moment, the illusion of their entitlement shattered completely. And Marion, quiet, steady Marion, felt the weight of Eleanor's trust settle firmly into her hands. The moment Alice closed the folder, the room's uneasy silence fractured.